Don Cabas. I'm the general manager of Great Lakes Grain here in Chatham. My phone number and email is on the screen. If you ever want to chat about anything, by all means, give me a holler. That would be great. I'm more than willing to talk to anybody about our business. Like we said earlier, Jeff Sherman, it's his 12th year here in Ontario. He's no stranger to any of us, so we'll get Jeff on here in just a couple of minutes. As the group had said earlier, we're going to have a question and answer period kind of at the end of our program. So please feel free to use the chat button, the Q&A button. If you can't find those and you got your phone handy, you can text 519-521-6077 and Petra will conduct the question and answer period right at the tail end of our presentation. So think of those questions, and if we don't answer them along the way, we'll answer them at the end. I just want to talk a little bit about Great Lakes Grain and how we're kind of structured. Great Lakes Grain has three partners, which is Agris Co-op, which is a farmer-owned co-op, FS Partners, which is a co-op in Midwestern Ontario, and also we've added Embrun Co-op in Ottawa. So we have three partners. So we are really a co-op doing business with co-ops. Farmers started co-ops years ago to help build purchasing power and marketing strength. Those co-ops grew to additional regional co-ops to build strength. So buying clubs kind of started to buy baler twine and kerosene cheaper. Then they got together and said, hey, maybe a group of us can buy better together and market together. And so Great Lakes Grain is a partnership of co-ops that's really owned by farmers for the benefit of farmers. So every dollar that we spend in capital or anything that we do, we consider that to be a farmer's dollar. So we're pretty cautious of where our how we spend those dollars, because those are your dollars. Those are everybody on this, a lot of people on this webinar today are owners or members of Agris, Embrun, and FS Partners. And those are your dollars we're playing with. So we want to make sure we're giving you a good return on your investment. This is just a quick descriptive of how Great Lakes Grain operates. Great Lakes Grain is a marketing partnership between Agris, Embrun Co-op, and FS Partners. Agris Co-op is a farmer-owned co-op, and it's coming into its 100th year. It's been around a long time. Agris is in the agronomy, grain, and energy business. All those three businesses are we represent at Agris. Embrun Co-op has 8 divisions, including feed, energy. They have a grocery business, building materials, a grain division, and an agronomy division as well. So very progressive co-op in Eastern Ontario, and we really welcome Embrun to the fold. And also, you'll notice on my beginning slide, it was in French as well. So Embrun is a very proud French community. My French is not very good. I will not attempt to speak it, and I welcome everybody from the Embrun group here this morning. So welcome aboard. And the FS Partners group, division of Growmark, they're in the agronomy, and we also have an energy division inside of that called UPI Energy FS. So we are a bunch of co-ops dealing with co-ops that are owned by farmers. Our footprint increased last year. I talked about this a little bit already. This is just a quick map of where Great Lakes Grain services. We start all the way down in Windsor, and now we go all the way up to the Ottawa Valley. We go as far north as up into Barrie. We did add McEwen Farms as a satellite last year. So this is our second full year with McEwen, and we really enjoy having Jamie and Robin on with our group, and we've had really good luck up in that area, and we welcome the McEwen customers on to this call here as well today. So thank you guys for showing up. I want to just flip it over to Devin Homick. Devin's our grain origination coach at FS Partners, and Devin's been with us for 12 or 13 years now and doing a heck of a job down in Delhi. So Devin, I'll let you take that over.
That's great. Thank you, Don. Good morning, everyone. So like Don said, I'm Devin Homick. I'm the grain origination coach with FS Partners. And I just wanted to kind of focus on some of the features that we have that people can access on our website. So you can see our website there, www.greatlakesgrain.com. So that's how I would recommend everybody access our Great Lakes Grain website. There's a lot of different grain information on there, as well as where you could find our cash bids. So one more thing, just wanted to go through this real quick again. If you have any questions throughout the duration of the presentation, I recommend you use the question and answer button on the bottom of the screen, or you could actually text your questions to 519-521-6077. So we're just gonna look, this is what the front screen of our webpage looks like. Again, www.greatlakesgrain.com. From there, you would actually go in, and on the top right-hand corner, you would see a symbol there that says cash bids. You would select that button. Then for someone that, if you have a login or have never created a login, you can see there, you can click here to request a username and password, which you would sign up, it would link it to your account, or you could log in using the username and password function. To the next screen it would go, and at that time it would actually allow you to access the cash bids for elevator values, our FOB farm values, and as well as our end user values, our direct ship values. So a farmer, through the daytime or even in the evening or at night, if you wanted to go and sell grain, you could actually go in and do this yourself. You would go in and select make an offer. At that time, this time I'm going to select the February of 21 value. So this will jump into another screen. This would be the transact portion. My account would show up in the external accounts. Then from there, I'm going to say I want to sell 10,000 bushel at a set value of 7.25. You would then submit for confirmation. That would give you jump to the second screen where you'd want to confirm your offer. So this is the last stage. Once you do this, your offer has become active, and you could go in then and you would be selling that amount of bushels for a set value. So there's a couple options that you can do. From there, you would check the box to say you acknowledge and you agree to all the terms, and then you would create an offer. So this is going to give you a few different options. You could sell at today's cash value, what the value is you see, or you could put an offer in for an extended value that is, you know, maybe 5, 10, 15 cents higher. You could set whatever increment you wanted to sell at as a target price. And as the market moved up, if you reach that value, you would sell those bushels. So it's a nice user-friendly function that people can use and sell grain when they want. The next portion is our customer interface. So this allows people to look at all of their contracting, settlement, or tickets within our Great Lakes Grain system. So what you would do is go under the products and service function on our website. And then if you see just down in the middle there, there's Frontier. Click on Frontier. This would pop up to another page. So there's two ways to go in. If you've never accessed Frontier, one way you could do it is request a login. You would fill in all the field information at the bottom of the screen. Once you do have your login created, you would select, click here to log in to the account, or you would fill in the field to get a new account if you aren't already set up with Frontier. This will link directly to your Great Lakes Grain account and will show you all of your information for your contract, tickets, and your settlements. One nice feature on this, for any contracts that you have, you would then be able to go into the contract feature, and you can actually confirm your contracts right there in Frontier. So you'd go in, confirm your contracts. It would then drop to another window where you would select the contract that's not confirmed. As you can see here, this contract here has not been confirmed yet. You would click on the confirm button, and again, it'll give you another window to finally confirm the contract and agree to the terms of the price that you have selected. So some really cool tools that people can use to access our website. Again, www.greatlakesgrain.com. You can go in, sell your own grain, or access our Frontier program and look at all the features there, all your contract tickets and settlements all in one location. We still recommend that you talk to your local branch. If you need any assistance with setting up one of these programs, you can contact any of them, any of your grain originators, or any of the grain staff there at the branch, and they can help you through it. One last thing that we want to talk about is electronic fund transfers for our EFT payment. As you can see, we know mail has been getting a little bit dicey sometimes with the current situation. So we recommend that customers sign up for electronic fund transfer. We want to make sure that you get your money quick and easy. One thing with this is we have found that people are getting paid, grain is shipped one day, money can be in the bank as quickly as the next day. So it's a very quick feature, very, very fast. Money is in your bank account quickly, and you would be sent your settlement via email or mail, depending on how you would want that. But most likely, trying to do as much as we can through email seems to be the quickest function. So again, if anybody has any questions throughout the duration of the presentation or anything I have covered, please ask me at any time. Thank you very much. And Don, we'll pass it back to you.
Hey, thank you, Devin. And the EFT piece, due to COVID, our office isn't terribly populated recently. Mailing checks from Chatham isn't as quick as we used to be, so we're not doing them every day. So if you can sign up for EFT, I mean, it just makes life so much easier. So just to jump on that little piece. Yeah, so just to summarize Devin's piece, if you want to see your contract settlements, et cetera, online, sign up for Frontier. If you want to place bids and offers in, you can go onto our website and do that. Question the other day around, would we rather see farmers put in their own offers, or would we rather talk to them? The answer is both. One side of it to me is, if you're, I kind of compare it to online banking. If you're doing online banking, you're moving your cash around, you're doing that online. But when it comes to your investments and to a deeper planning piece, you're probably better to talk to somebody. What's our opinion and those kind of things. So we want to do both of those things with you and help you along that way. I just want to talk for a couple of minutes here about our Ontario marketplace. Our Ontario corn crop is, we had a pretty large crop in 2020, 176 bushels per acre reported by Agricor, about 2.2 million acres. We had a big export program that started in the spring of 2020. As COVID came in a year ago in March, we really saw, as the lockdown started, we really saw the demand of ethanol fade away and gas usage fade away. And that brought the exports into Ontario. So all of a sudden the export market kind of picked up, and it has actually stayed fairly strong all the way through. Ethanol demand soft due to COVID. And with that export market coming in, last summer, that basis level from a US basis perspective got pretty decent, and it's been strong and it's kind of stayed strong. Today we have this inverted futures market, meaning that the futures months are less tomorrow than what they are today, meaning that the market wants your grain today, not tomorrow. It's making those summer marketings difficult for everyone. End users and farmers alike are struggling a little bit with that. Most industrial plants today have pretty good coverage here in the province until spring. And I think that export market is looking for some spring move here as the seaway will open up here in the spring. The bigger question is, will we have enough corn to get us to harvest of 21? And that's just an ongoing one. Talking a little bit about Ontario soybeans here. Sorry, I'm trying to read questions as I go, so I'm not a very good multitasker, trying to do two things at once. We had a pretty large yielding 2020 soybean crop. Agricor's yield reported at 52 bushels per acre. Our acres were off a little bit because we had increased wheat and increased corn. That was at the expense of beans. We had a large fall export program. Couple that with a couple that with our from the market run, this rally through harvest, this has turned into one front-loaded market. That bean market's been on a tear since August. Farmers were heavy sellers. Elevators were heavy movers of grain into that export program. Jeff will talk about the exports and China as we move ahead. Certainly been a front-loaded market. Will spring of 21 create more exports out of the province? I'm not so sure how many beans are left. We had a big export program, and farmers have been pretty big sellers of those beans. Crushers today are the only market. We only have 2 crushers in the province, ADM in Windsor and Bungie in Hamilton. They are the only market we have here through the winter on old crop beans. Certainly new crop. We've got new crop basis levels remaining fairly strong here as we go ahead. From a U.S. perspective. To the downside of that, we've had a higher Canadian dollar over the last 6 to 8 months that has kind of hurt our local basis. So from a U.S. basis perspective, we've been fairly strong. I think what we're going to get into, and we're going to ask you a few poll questions on a bit of this stuff. What's your acreage going to look like? Because our acreage battle is going to be a battle between now and the day you're sitting in the tractor seat. The wheat market today, I think we have a very high acreage that's been planted for the 21 crop here in Lambton. We got a little snow last night, so we got a little bit of snow cover on it. I think the wheat went in pretty decent shape. We had a good early soybean harvest, and the wheat followed, and it's in pretty good shape in our normal wheat belt. But there's certainly no carry in this wheat market. Usually, last number of years we've had pretty good carry, but there's just nothing in it. Meaning, they want the wheat today, they don't want it tomorrow. We're seeing that even in our new crop. You don't see any spread from new crop to into September. You're not seeing very much that carry portion. Good values, relatively high basis considering our acres that are planted. Looks like the export market on new crop wheat seems pretty strong. That's kind of where we'll be. And as I want you to think of a couple of things as we're going through Jeff's presentation here. We're in that pre-planting season between January to March, where you can be pre-planting or pre-planning your marketing. How do you, where should you be in your marketing? What's been your historic selling pattern? What did you do last year? What's the seasonal market doing? Jeff will talk about the seasonals. I think you want to think about how much grain do I want to have sold by the time I'm sitting in the tractor seat, and think that through over this next little bit. Our next kind of marketing season is the planting season from April through June. At this point, think through how much grain would I like to have sold by the time I got my crop in the ground and I can see it. How far along do I want to be? How does that affect your marketing? As we get into the growing season in July and September, if I got enough wheat on the books, how will I move my wheat? What are some of those other pieces? What am I going to do with that last little bit of old crop, my lottery bushels, and how will I move that out? And then as you get into your harvest season, do I have enough space? But I really think you want to look at the pre-planting season. That's where we're at today. And this meeting today is all about planning and how do we plan from here on in. This market has just done some really cool stuff. And, we had a comment the other day, a grower said, I'm scared to death to sell anything because I don't know what it's going to do. And hey, none of us really do either. If we did, we'd be sitting in an island somewhere. But it is that spot of what do I do next, and how can we help you plan, give you good information, give you some of the tools to help you do that. So we're here for that. Welcome, Jeff Sherman. He's no stranger to us. Jeff's been coming for 10 or 12 years now. And Jeff, I'll let you take that away.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I want to thank you for taking the time to log into your computers and giving me the opportunity to visit with you about what's going on in the world of commodity markets. And I certainly hope that all my Canadian friends are staying safe and healthy. As everybody knows, the last 12 months has certainly been a whirlwind. We've all made sacrifices. I'm working from my house. I'm in my basement right now. You guys will probably appreciate this story, but my wife has an 18-year-old miniature schnauzer. And he's been a pretty good dog, but he's getting up there in years and he can be demanding at times. So when I've done these virtual presentations in the past, my wife has always been able to be here to make sure he doesn't bark. She couldn't be here this morning, so I a pregnant stepdaughter to come and make sure that the dog doesn't bark, and her due date is tomorrow. So I'm hoping that she doesn't go into labor on me this morning during my presentation, kind of living on the edge a little bit here this morning. I will tell you that I've given a few of these virtual presentations already, and they are not the same as in person. I can still share with you the information, but it's not the same as being able to stand up in front of you where I have the opportunity to shake your hand and see your smiling faces and interact with you on a personal level. And I miss that. I have a lot of friends across Ontario and look forward to being able to come every year and see them and have the opportunity to make new friends. And I certainly miss that. And looking forward to the day when we can all travel freely without the fear of becoming ill or making somebody else sick. A year ago this week, I was in Ontario, and at that time, we were just starting to hear about some of the first COVID-19 cases in the United States and Canada. And fast forward 52 weeks, we now have over 26 million people in the United States who's tested positive for COVID-19. And in my home state of Iowa, we have had over 340,000 people test positive for COVID. I am one of those 340,000 people. At the end of October, I tested positive for COVID-19. I will share with you that my symptoms were very, very mild. I lost my taste and smell for 30 days, but my symptoms were very mild. And in fact, if I would drink a six-pack today, it would cause me more grief than what COVID-19 did. So I consider myself very, very fortunate and very, very lucky because I know that is not the case for everybody. Once I recovered from COVID, I donated blood. And here, if you donate blood, they test it to see if you have antibodies against the virus. And of course, I tested positive for having antibodies, which I like to think that I have some protection against the virus today, should I be exposed to it again. Once they find out you have COVID-19 antibodies, why there's a big demand and a big need for convalescent plasma. So I go every once in a while and make a donation. They tell me that one donation can help up to 4 COVID-19 patients who are struggling in their recovery. So I think it's a very small part for me to do, but it's something that I think people need to do if you can help others. Those of you that have heard me speak in the past would probably agree that more times than not, I paint maybe not always a bearish picture, but a more negative picture than I do a positive picture. And there's a reason why. The reality is if we get the acres and we get the yield, we usually simply overproduce. You are not going to hear me paint a negative picture today. Not for old crop and not for new crop. It's the positive picture. Everything is going to be positive today. There's a lot of positives to talk about. We got a demand-led bull market. We need lots of acres next year. China's back in here buying large quantities of US grain. And I think the biggest positive of all is we have a COVID-19 vaccine. Now, I do have some concerns. And probably my biggest concern right now is what is the farmer eating this winter without in-person meetings? I'm a little worried that you might not be getting proper nutrition since no one is having in-person meetings this year. Normally when I'm in Ontario for a week, By this time in the week, I've had 7 or 8 roast beef dinners and that many big breakfasts. U.S.-China trade relations still remain tense. We have a huge debt here in the United States. I think we're heading for a period of inflation. Food prices continue to rise around the world. We have a new administration in Washington, D.C. How does that affect agriculture? Will we see more regulations for ag? And I think one of the biggest concerns that I have is we're not able to get COVID under control. And I think the economy is building on the idea that we will get it under control in a timely manner and the economy exploding higher. The USDA has corn ending stocks pegged at 1.55 billion bushels. Our stocks to use 6%. Both are at their lowest level since 2013. Now the question going forward is, does this stocks number get larger or smaller as we move throughout the marketing year? And I think it gets smaller. The USDA has us consuming 5.65 billion bushels of corn for feed usage in the US this year. That's down 177 million versus a year ago. Our first quarter feed data from our stocks report was actually up slightly versus a year ago. Now, I don't have a whole lot of faith in this first quarter stocks data. This picture becomes a little more clearer as we move through the marketing year. But you certainly could take this data, make the argument that the USDA is possibly underestimating the amount of corn we're going to feed in the US this year. USDA has us consuming 4.95 billion bushels of corn for the production of ethanol this year. That's up 98 million bushel versus a year ago. Our weekly corn grind for ethanol has actually been running slightly under the pace that's needed to meet the USDA target. However, I want to point out that last year, during the months of April and May, our ethanol grind dropped off dramatically as we shut the economy down. We will not see that drop this year. Therefore, I think we're going to be on pace to meet the USDA's target. Last week, ADM announced the sale of 200 million gallons of ethanol to China. Our ethanol exports, which is the green line here, has been running below what they were a year ago. The sale to China probably brings our year-to-date ethanol exports up to where they were a year ago. The million-dollar question here is, does China step in and buy more US ethanol? If they do, I can make an argument that we're going to consume more than 4.95 billion bushels of corn for the production of ethanol. Another wild card is gas demand. Our gas demand has been running between 12 to 13% below year-ago levels. If you are a believer that we will get this vaccine rolled out, and by the second or third quarter of the year, and people start to resume driving habits, something closer to pre-COVID levels, and our gasoline demand increases, well, once again, that would play into the idea that we could be underestimating the amount of corn we're going to use for ethanol. I continue to believe electric cars are the largest threat to the ethanol corn market. I have shown you this slide for the last 2 to 3 years. With the new administration in Washington, D.C., I think that helps accelerate how quickly electric cars capture more of the market share. Last week, GM announced that they set a target to have all electric vehicles by 2035. And the Biden administration has said that they're going to move the federal fleet to electric vehicles. Now, don't get me wrong, ethanol is not going anywhere. It's going to be around for a long, long time. But as this technology continues to advance and as electric vehicles capture more of the market share, we will, over time, use less and less fossil fuels. USDA has us exporting a record 2.55 billion bushels of corn this year. That is up 43% versus a year ago. U.S. exports of corn estimated to be up 43% versus a year ago. Our year-to-date export sales is 146% versus a year ago. And our inspections, or the amount of corn that has left the country already, is up 84% versus a year ago. Our export data just screams that the USDA has corn exports grossly understated. I certainly look for the USDA to adjust our corn exports higher in next week's WASDE report. And I can make a case today, or an argument today, that our corn exports could be as large as 2.9 billion bushels. What's going on with corn exports? And it's China. China has bought almost 18 million metric tons of US corn so far this year. I think China's total imports of US corn this year could be 20 to 22 million metric tons. Currently, the USDA has China importing 17.5 million metric tons. Now, I certainly look for this number to be increased in next week's report as well. But the reality is, I think we're going to see 250 to 350 million bushels more in corn exports. What's going on with China's corn situation? China had African swine fever devastate their hog herd. Their hog herd has recovered to pre-ASF levels. COVID come in, which hit demand. And then when I go back and I look at this chart, it tells me something's wrong. And this is a chart of China and world corn ending stocks. And world stocks are the green bars, China's the red bars. And I want to draw your attention to the 2017-18 crop year. You can see here between 17 and 18, China's corn ending stocks, as well as world corn ending stocks, both jumped dramatically. What happened during that time period? Back in 2018, China's National Bureau of Statistics went back and revised the amount of corn production that happened between the time period of 2008 to 2018. And what they said was there was an additional 290-some million metric tons of corn production that took place during that time period. The USDA took those numbers, went and revised their feed and residual demand numbers for China over that time period. And the net effect was they added 149 million metric tons to China's corn ending stocks and world corn ending stocks. I think part of the situation in China with their corn is back in 2018, this revision higher, it was increased by too much. And we had African swine fever hit the herd, which reduced demand. We had COVID hit, which reduced demand. Now things have turned the corner and they're going to the cupboard, and there's not as much corn there as maybe they thought they had at one time. I think it's a combination of those 3 or 4 things. And plus their government had a push to reduce their large state inventories as well. All this corn that China's buying, we don't know what they're doing with it, if it's going into state reserves or if it's being fed or a combination of the two. China's government does not release the quantities that the government owns. We don't know how much corn or soybeans or wheat that the government has in grain reserves. I'm pretty sure their government knows this number, and the whole world would like to know what it is, because it would make the picture of what's going on in China a little more clear and make it maybe a little easier to just figure out what's going on over there. USDA has Brazil corn production pegged at 109 million metric ton. They have corn exports out of the country increasing 4 million metric ton to 39 million metric ton. One thing I want to point out about Brazil corn production, the USDA has it pegged at 109 million metric ton crop. Just yesterday, USDA Itachi in Brazil had the corn crop pegged at 105 million metric ton, and CONAB, which is the equivalent of the USDA in Brazil, has Brazil's corn crop pegged at 102 million metric ton. Keep in mind that 75% of Brazil's corn crop is produced in their safrinha crop, or their second corn crop, which isn't even planted yet. That crop gets planted behind soybean harvest. It gets planted during the month of February and the first couple weeks of March. Brazil's soybean harvest is behind pace. The planting pace for the second corn crop is behind historical levels. The reality is, if the safrinha crop continues to be planted behind historical levels, it increases the odds that we have a below trend line yield in Brazil's second corn crop. If we would have a 5% below trend line yield in Brazil's safrinha corn crop, that would amount to the loss of about 4 million metric tons of production. If you believe CONAB's numbers correct right out of the gate, that would drop Brazil corn production below 100 million metric tons. We need a large Brazilian second corn crop. Argentina corn situation, pegged at 47.5 million metric tons. I think I read Harris Grain Exchange lowered their estimate down to 46 million metric tons. Exports out of Argentina projected to drop 3 million metric ton to 34 million metric ton. There's been some production issues in Argentina due to the La Nina and some dry conditions. 22% of the crop rated good to excellent versus over 50% a year ago. Argentina government is concerned about food inflation. A few weeks ago, the Argentina government banned corn exports out of the country until March 1st. They got pushback from farmers and exporters. They removed that ban and then implemented a 30,000 metric ton daily corn export limit. Once again, they got pushback on that. They lifted all restrictions, but issued a statement that they would monitor exports to ensure domestic supplies remain adequate. I think if we would see the Argentina corn crop drop down to 44, 45 million metric tons, we will see the government step in there and try to restrict corn exports in some fashion. Ukraine corn production down as well, 29.5 million metric tons. Exports falling by 6 million metric tons to 24 million metric tons. Last week, the Ukrainian government, they capped corn exports out of that country at 24 million metric tons. Same story here. Ukraine's concerned about food inflation. They want to make sure they maintain ample domestic stocks. I like to tell the producer this year, this is one of those rare times where he might hit the trifecta, where we have reduced North American corn production, we have reduced Black Sea corn production, and we could potentially have reduced South American corn production. Now, if anybody has ever hit a trifecta bet at the dog track or the horse races, you were very, very pleased when you went to the payout window. World corn ending stocks and stocks to use ratio falling for the 5th year in a row. And once again, I think our world corn ending stocks are overstated, and that goes back to the adjustments that we've seen in 2018. Corn carryout right now pegged at 1.55 billion bushels, and this is the latest USDA WASDE report numbers from the January report. And what I want to point out here is, if the USDA would not have reduced demand in the January report, our carryout today would be at 1.3 billion bushels right now. And I think we are heading to that level. And we might see that number in next week's report. I can make a case where our exports could be as large as 2.9 billion bushels. That would bring our corn ending stocks down to 1.2. I can also make a case depending on how this pandemic plays out. And if we sell more ethanol to China, where the USDA has ethanol exports, or the amount of corn we're going to use for ethanol understated, which would bring down our ending stocks closer to 1 billion bushels. The point I want to make today is I can make lots of cases where this corn ending stocks number is going to get smaller. I cannot come up with a scenario right now where that stocks number is going to get bigger, which should remain supportive for prices as we continue through the summer months into the spring and the summer months. Our seasonal charts for May corn would tell us that May corn usually tops out about here in March. I've always been a proponent of marketing some bushels based on our seasonal charts. This is one of those years where you could simply say, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to get away from that. I'm continuing to make sure that I sell some bushels. Maybe it's not as much as in years past, but I'm going to continue to market some based on our seasonal patterns. Keep in mind, manage money, the funds, own a large, long corn position. Should they ever get nervous and want to liquidate some of their length, that certainly could suck some premium out of this market real quick. And we seen that happen a couple weeks ago when the funds liquidated some length and we had corn trade down limit. Show you this chart every year, corn stocks versus price. And you know, normally when I speak to you, we've got corn stocks up in this box between 1.7 and over 2.4. We're not in that box at 1.5 with the idea we're heading down here to 1.3 or even lower. I do not think the highs are in. I think we made a new high in corn yesterday for old crop. And I think that some point in time, we certainly could go up to that $6 level, and depending on how things float out here, maybe higher, but not saying that's going to happen today, but I don't think our highs are in yet. We have a long way to go before we have another crop in the ground, and it's hard for me to be bearish until we know exactly what the 2021-22 production is going to be. Now, if you go back farther in time where we had corn stocks drop below 1 billion bushels, you know, that's when we had corn trade between $6 and $7.50 for a while, and even took a quick run up to $8. Not saying that's going to happen. I don't think corn inventories will drop below 1 billion bushels, but just wanted to point that out. What's acres going to be? Yield? Is weather going to cooperate? The largest private estimate I've seen right now for corn acres next year is at 94.2 million. Bean acres at 90 million. I think there's some people out there think that could be 90.5 million acres. If we would get 94.2 million acres and 90 million bean acres, that would be a combined 184.2 million acres between the two crops. That would be 3.8 million acres more than what we've seen in 2017. The reality is we need these acres. We need that many acres. And I think 94 million corn acres might be a stretch. I think we need 11 to 12 million additional acres of all crops. And we're going to need the 10.2 million acres that were in the prevent plant program last year brought back into production. We need good spring weather to bring these acres back into production. Can't ignore weather. This is the U.S. Drought monitor, the latest maps. This one here is the current map. This is the same map over here a year ago. I seen a weather guy speak 2 weeks ago. He had these exact two maps in his presentation. He was not predicting a drought in the Western Corn Belt, but he was concerned about it. And he certainly talked about it. And his recommendation to the producer was get your seeds in the ground early. Trendline yield 180.5 bushels per acre. Should we get 94 million corn acres next year and a trendline yield? Yes, we can add to our corn ending stocks next year. But this is using a carry-in next year 1.3. and 94.2 million acres, which I think might be a stretch. If our carry in next year's 1.1, our corn ending stocks, we stay pretty tight next year. And once again, this is using 94.2 million acres. So, you know, the numbers look like they stay pretty tight next year. Yeah, we can build some inventories next year, but we can't afford to have any North American yield production loss next year. New crop corn, same thing, just skyrocketed higher. Don't think the highs are in new crop corn either. Our seasonal charts would tell us that D's corn typically tops out in about June. Once again, I'm going to make some sales based on these seasonal patterns. Soybeans, soybean ending stocks pegged at 140 million bushel carryout. Our stocks to use ratio at 3%, both the lowest since 2015. Would draw your attention out here to the 13-14 crop year when we had bean ending stocks below 100 million at 92 million bushel carryout. I would point out we didn't see that 92 million number until late in the year. Throughout most of the year, the USDA kept showing us a number something north of 100 million bushels. U.S. soybean crush pegged to be a record 2.2 billion bushels, up 1.4% versus a year ago. Soybean crush projected to be up 1.4% versus a year ago, and our year-to-date cumulative soybean crush through December is up 6.1% versus a year ago. I have not seen any signs of demand rationing yet in soybeans, and we need to ration some demand, and we do that through price. The reality is crush is going dramatically in the months to come, and we will see that happen. In fact, soybeans could be hard to find out here in July and August. And I also look for soybean import number to be increased in next Tuesday's report as well. We will import some soybeans from South America this year. How far north they work is yet to be determined, but I have seen some people think they will work as far north as Quincy, Illinois, which would be down in the southeast corner of Iowa across the river. U.S. soybean exports pegged at a record 2.23 billion bushels, up 524 million bushels from a year ago. Bean exports pegged to be up 31% versus a year ago. Our year-to-date export sales are up 81%, and our inspections of the amount of beans that's already left the country is up 80% versus a year ago. Our export data would argue the USDA is underestimating exports by 50 to maybe 100 million bushels. Now, whether they are willing to show us a number with bean carryout going down to 100 million or less this early in the marketing year, I highly doubt that they're willing to do that just yet. But right now, the stars are lining up that tell me our bean carryout's getting smaller and today and not larger. Soybean exports to China, we have just under 1.3 billion bushels of beans sold to China. China's current soybean import pace and U.S. export pace would indicate that there's a possibility China's total soybean imports could be increased 2 to 4 million metric tons. And right now, the USDA has China importing a total of 100 million metric tons. World corn or world soybean production, we have usage exceeding production for the second year in a row. South American bean production, Argentina soybean crop pegged at 48 million metric ton. Brazil's crop pegged at 133 million metric ton, and Paraguay's right at 10 million metric tons. Brazilian bean exports at 85 million metric ton, Argentina at 7 million metric ton. Want to point out, it looks like the ship lineup data for Brazil exports in the month of February on soybeans is 9 to 10 million metric tons. And the reality is that Brazil's soybean harvest is behind pace. And I think it's going to be a push to load out 5 million metric tons of beans out of Brazil in the month of February. And then 4 million metric ton might be a push. Last year in the month of February, they loaded out 4.8 million metric tons of beans. Why is this important to get as many beans out of Brazil in the month of February? Because if China can't get them out of Brazil, that means they're going to take some more out of the US, and we can't afford to have that happen. But right now, unless China's bean harvest gets picked up and starts advancing a little faster, it's going to be a struggle, I think, to get 5 million metric tons of beans even out of Brazil in February. And I don't think might even be a struggle to get 4 million metric ton. World soybean demand, record world bean, meal, and oil demand, and world soybean ending stocks and stocks to use ratio falling for the second year in a row. And it's just not corn and soybeans that is tight. All veg oils are tight. And this chart shows that world oilseed ending stocks to use ratio, lowest level since 2007, 2008 market year. Old crop beans, once again here, I don't think that our highs are in old crop beans. Certainly can make an argument today where our bean ending stocks could be 100 million bushels or less. And you go back and you look in history, when we've had bean ending stocks as tight as they are today, you know, that's when we had beans trade between 14 and 16 bucks. And I'm not ruling out that we can't go out up to that level at some point in time. You know, this market is not for the faint of heart. And, you know, we have any production issues this spring and summer, any planting issues, it's going to create some more fireworks. Keep in mind though, same thing in soybeans as corn. Managed money has a very long soybean position. Should they start to liquidate, certainly would suck some premium right out of the market in a hurry. Seasonal charts would tell us that July beans continue to rally on into the summer months. Pigs get fed, hogs get slaughtered. Farmers asked me, and I think Don talked about this just a little bit, where he had a farmer tell him that he was afraid to sell something because it might go up. And I get it. These markets are going to remain volatile. We are going to continue to see very large price swings going forward and continue just like we have. This market's not for the faint of heart. Everybody's risk tolerance is different. I've been telling the farmer, continue to make small incremental sales into the rallies. There's risks out here. And if you continue to make small incremental sales into the rally, it does reduce your risk of potentially getting slaughtered at some point in time. I'm friendly. I'm probably as friendly as I've ever been, and that makes me nervous because I know things can change, and therefore I'm going to continue to reward the rallies with small incremental sales. Acres next year, you know, back up here, I don't think I pointed out that we will get our first look at what the USDA thinks our acreage mix might be this spring at the Ag Outlook Forum here in a couple weeks. It starts on February 18th. That is all virtual this year, and you can follow online. Soybean acres at 90 million. I've seen some estimates as high as 90.5 million acres. Trend line yield at 51.2 bushels per acre. And you can see here, we need 90 million bean acres and a trend line yield to add modest amounts to our soybean ending stocks. And this is assuming here we have beginning stocks of 140, and I think it's closer to 100 million. And that makes things even tighter for next year, which should continue to support new crop bean prices. I think we've got a range here right now for new crop beans between 11 and 12 bucks. I think new crop bean prices have more work to do. If you run the numbers on new crop beans and new crop corn, it doesn't argue for the Midwest farmer in the high yielding states of Iowa, Illinois, Indiana to change their rotation. So that I believe maybe new crop beans has a little more work to do. Seasonal charts for Nove beans tell us that Nove beans continue to rally on into the summer months as well. My thoughts about China. China didn't meet their phase 1 trade agreement. I have not seen the December data yet, but I think when we see that data, China will have imported somewhere around $24 billion worth of U.S. ag goods. They're supposed to import or buy even more this year. If China makes a valiant attempt to even get close to that phase 2 trade agreement number, things look really good for us for this year as well. What's going on there with China, is all this ag that they're buying is part of that political to show the Biden administration that they want to try to be a little better player, a little better actor. We just don't know. I definitely think they need the goods. But part of all these purchases could be part political to them. I do think trade relations with China is one of the bright spots, although it remains tense. President Biden, he inherited a lot of leverage against China from the Trump administration. And I do not think he will give that leverage up. I believe Biden will hold the line on tariffs, at least for a while anyway, and continue to hold China accountable. Both sides of the political aisle, the Democrats and the Republicans, both have an appetite for firmer policies against China. Whether you like Trump or not, this is the one thing that he brought to light that really both parties agree on. When you look at some of the legislation that has come up for vote under the Trump administration, it passed with bipartisan support. So I think we'll continue to see the Biden administration hold the line on China. Do think he'll try to rally our allies and rally against China, but you got to keep in mind that our allies have different goals. I think China or Biden, if he does try to do something with China, it'll be more on the human rights sector than anything. Taiwan, that's a hot button. Keep an eye on what's going on in Taiwan and the U.S. and China relationship concerning Taiwan. It's an island of democracy that China claims is theirs. They've said they're going to unify it with the mainland, and they've said they'll use force if necessary. Now, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, before he left office, and this was a political move by the Trump administration, he lifted the government rules prohibiting interactions between American and Taiwan diplomats. They did this to box Biden in a little harder on China, because if Biden maintains Trump's policy, his relationship's going to be rougher with China. But if he goes back and reinstates some of those guidelines, he's going to be labeled as soft here in the United States. The Biden administration did invite Taiwan's representative in the U.S. to his inauguration, and both the Secretary of State and Secretary of Defense indicated support for Taiwan during their confirmation hearings. So I think Biden's going to remain supportive of Taiwan. U.S. farmer has received over $45 billion in aid since 2018 to help offset COVID and retaliatory tariffs. We have just printed money and thrown it at the U.S. farmer over the last 2 years. So many programs that I don't even know that I can keep track of them all. The reality is, when Trump went after China, he took care of the farmer. And all of this aid, it's enabled the farmer's income to be up 43% this past year versus the previous year. It's an amazing 39% of the U.S. farmers' net income last year came in the form of government payments. The reality is that this can't continue. I don't think it's going to continue under the Biden administration. And the U.S. farmer today would tell you that he doesn't need it, he doesn't deserve it, where prices are today. When I first put this presentation together, I was under the impression the U.S. dollar would remain under pressure as our debt continues to increase and we have probably more stimulus coming down the pipeline here. But I have changed my view on that just this week. When I look at a U.S. dollar chart, we have seen the U.S. dollar have a pretty good run higher. We went and took out the December highs. And I think what may be going on here is the U.S. economy, although it's teetering, it's probably doing better than other economies throughout the world. And we're starting to get a feel or a general idea that maybe the U.S. is going to be the first to come out of this COVID situation as we get this vaccine rolled out. And I think that might be coming in here and helping support the U.S. dollar. So I have changed my position on the U.S. dollar. U.S. federal debt, a whopping $27.5 trillion, headed towards $30 trillion. Our federal debt as a percent of GDP is 127%. Has never been that high in the history of the United States. How does this all play out someday is yet to be determined. I do think we're headed for a period of inflation. And if you are a believer that history repeats itself, this chart just screams that we're headed for a period of inflation. We can't continue to print money forever. I think if this COVID vaccine gets rolled out and we have COVID somewhat under control, we could see inflation hit us pretty quick. I think there would be some items that you simply won't be able to find. I just don't think our supply chain can get ramped up quick enough to meet the pin-up demand that is out here. Unemployment rate, 6.3%. That is a January number, came out this morning. That was down from December of 6.7%. I think our employment here in the United States, good job of recovering from when we shut things down, but we still have a long ways to go to the 3.5% unemployment that we had prior to COVID. There's a new sheriff in town. And in my opinion, he gave my Canadian friends the finger on his first day in office when he canceled the Keystone XL pipeline. I am a fan of the Keystone XL pipeline. My truck runs on fossil fuels. It doesn't run on fairy dust and unicorn peat. I thought the Keystone XL was a good project for both countries. I'm very disappointed that Biden whacked it on day one. He did so without even speaking to our Canadian friends about it. There's not a country in North America more environmentally conscious than Canada. And Canada wanted the pipeline, and I think that the U.S. should honor their obligation to complete it. I hope your government comes after us to recoup your losses, because there was taxpayer money spent on that. So I hope you come after it. I was equally disappointed in your leader's response. I thought Trudeau's response of "we're disappointed" was very, very weak. I would have liked to have seen Trudeau be a little more aggressive in his response, maybe ruffle Biden's feathers a little bit, or at least not allow it to be so easy for Biden. Of course, Biden's seen as a lot greener than Trump. Obviously, climate, COVID, and some domestic issues is taking priority over trade. And it's just not China that Biden inherited some leverage against. I mean, Biden inherited some leverage against all of our trading partners, and he's not going to be quick to give any of that leverage up. The other thing I'd point out, if you go back and you would look at Biden's campaign, his slogan was Buy America versus Trump's slogan of Keep America Great or Make America Great Again. But the two slogans are pretty similar. Biden took a page out of Trump's playbook. His slogan's Buy America. So if he's going to stand behind that, obviously he's going to hold on to some of this leverage that he inherited from the Trump organization. Of course, it's going to get us back in the Paris Climate Agreement, rejoining the World Health Organization. Democrats have full control. They've got control of the House. The Senate is split 50-50 between Republicans and Democrats, with Vice President Harris having the tie-breaking vote. I do like to point out, this makes the conservatives very, very nervous that Democrats have full control. But I do like to point out it requires 60 members of the Senate to basically end a debate on a topic and move it for a vote. So if the Democrats come up with anything big, they're going to have to get some Republicans on board. Would point out that the Democrat senator out of West Virginia and the senator out of Colorado would likely be against any major climate reforms, or at least attempt to water down that legislation. The Colorado senator was actually a fossil fuels geologist early on in his career. Vilsack returns as the U.S. Ag Secretary. He was the Ag Secretary for 8 years under the Biden administration. This was a safe pick for Biden. Vilsack knows the landscape. I think it's status quo. I'm perfectly fine with Vilsack being our Ag Secretary. He's got strong ties to Iowa. He was the Iowa governor, strong ties to Iowa in the Midwest. He does have a strong connection to big ag, which some people think that's not a good thing. But I'm perfectly fine with Vilsack being our Ag Secretary, and primarily due to I was comfortable with him the last time around, and I know that he has strong ties to Iowa and the Midwest. The Ag Secretary gig must be a good gig because he gave up an $833,000 job as the CEO of the U.S. Dairy Export Council to become the Ag Secretary again. Now, the progressives out there want to see more of the Farm Bill money and the Ag Department money channeled to climate change. And if you haven't noticed a few buzzwords the new administration have been using, it's climate, carbon capturing, climate mitigation. Will we see some type of carbon capturing program in the 2023 Farm Bill? And my guess is yes. And in fact, we'll probably see some pilot programs leading up to that over the next couple years, where they'll pay the farmer to seed grasses and capture carbon and save the world. Duck Dynasty took over the Capitol a few weeks ago. I'm sure everybody's seen this because the whole world was watching it on TV. Don't have a whole lot to say about it other than it was terribly embarrassing for us here. When I did first seen this picture over here, I thought, well, that's the U.S.-Mexican border wall. Turned out to be our very own Capitol. But definitely embarrassing. I think the takeaway from all this was democracy prevailed, and that is what is important. Wasn't for sure that President Trump was going to leave the White House, but he did leave peacefully on his own. He didn't attend the inauguration of Biden. Not the first time an outgoing president didn't attend the inauguration of an incoming president. But although he didn't attend Biden's inauguration, he did leave Biden a note. And it is my understanding that President Trump moved to Florida, where he is now homeless, panhandling for a Twitter account. Move on here to wheat, and I'm just about done, and then we'll have some time for some questions here. But wheat ending stocks, 836 million bushel carry out, the lowest level since 2014. World wheat demand just continues to grow, as does world wheat imports. Our world wheat imports are up an amazing 76 million metric tons since 2007. We do have a little bump in world wheat ending stocks. Russia wheat exports. What I want to point out here is Russia's concerned about food inflation as well. And Russia has been trying to come up with a way to implement a wheat export tariff to try to help ensure that they maintain ample domestic wheat stocks. And just yesterday, their economy minister come out and made a statement. They were trying to come up with a permanent grain export mechanism based on price. And then I think Putin issued a statement yesterday as well, something about being concerned about the rising price of world food prices. Future production, winter wheat area seeded is up 1.58 million acres versus a year ago. I think our all wheat acres will only be up about 1.1 million acres. I think we will lose some spring wheat acres in the Dakotas and Minnesota, as there's a pretty strong incentive to expand corn and soy acres. Trend line yield at 49.1 bushels per acre. We're going to have a pull next year on our wheat ending stocks. The numbers certainly line up to where our ending stocks next year is going to be reduced, and I can make a case where our ending stocks numbers next year could be closer to a 700 million bushel carryout. The takeaway here is we cannot afford to have any northern hemisphere weather issues that lead to wheat yield loss. If we would have any weather problem this spring or summer with our wheat, it could certainly send wheat prices skyrocketing higher. So the wheat market's going to be very, very sensitive to northern hemisphere weather. Seasonal charts for wheat tells us the wheat usually tops out right here in February. I know wheat sold off here over this week some, but once again, I'm perfectly fine with making some sales based off of our seasonal patterns. Same thing with D-Sweet, tops out about here in February, does give us another time to make some sales out here in March. Things stay tight for wheat as well. Same story here. I like all commodities. I want to thank everybody for taking the time today to log into your computer and giving me the opportunity to visit with you. I miss you. I look forward to the day when I can come and visit your great country and we can interact more on a more personal basis. And with that, we'll open it up for questions.
Thanks for the presentation. So we have, we'll start off with a comment and then I'll go into the first question. It said, if Jeff Sherman and the US population were struggling to decide they wanted Trump or Biden to lead their country, perhaps they would consider taking Justin Trudeau off our hands. That was a comment.
I think, well, I'll address that.
Okay.
I think we have our own version of maybe Trudeau and Biden to a certain extent. Obviously, they're on the same page with each other on saving the world through climate change. So, but we'll let you keep JT, and I guess we'll see how this works with Biden over the next 4 years.
Thanks, Jeff. With the U.S. dominance of the world economy and the U.S. dollar being the petroleum currency, why is the U.S. dollar so low?
Because we've been printing money faster than we can probably make paper to print it on. That's pushed the dollar so low.
Perfect. You can say the next thing. And Jeff, you're going to be in big trouble, big debt to your daughter-in-law, big time. Yes, thank you to her for helping us today. The next question we have a very convenient local market for corn that wants to buy at harvest, usually at a lower price point. How would you suggest to capture price opportunities while still being able to move corn locally? Hedging?
Yeah, that is one way, but when you start doing that, you subject yourself in Canada to the dollar risk.
Okay. Maybe Don can touch on that as well. Don, do you have any comments on that?
I just have I probably have more questions than comments. Is it a local market that we're shipping to at harvest and that's not there later on? Are we just a harvest deliverer and don't have farm bins? Those are probably some more of my questions. You know, and I think, as Jeff pointed out, kind of some of those seasonal things, how do you take advantage? It's not maybe who you sell to, it's more about when you sell, and can you take advantage of price points throughout the year at that local market. So probably more questions than answers there, Petra.
Okay, thanks, Don. Jeff, why do we need a big Brazilian second corn crop?
Because if Brazil doesn't grow a big second corn crop, that means that more exports out of the United States. And I painted a picture here just a little bit ago where our corn ending stocks could drop down towards 1 billion bushels. And if we would have production issues in Brazil's second corn crop, that means even more exports out of the United States, which, you know, when they eventually get to a point where to pipeline supplies, and we would need to ration more demand out of the U.S.
Thank you, Jeff. Given some of the bullish outlook that you have said today, how long before usage declines in the livestock industry, or are the export opportunities so great it won't impact in the 2021 timeframe?
We're probably not to the point where we need to start rationing demand in corn yet. So I don't anticipate feed demand or corn usage for feed to drop off. I did see a couple weeks ago where there was some wheat being fed in Kansas at a feed yard. And given where the price of wheat is versus corn, that kind of surprised me, but that was more of a protein play since soybean meal's getting so high. So, and we'll probably see more of that as we go forward, because I think proteins are going to get pretty high this summer as we slow our crush rate down.
Perfect. Thanks, Jeff. Don, maybe I'll throw this question to you. Where do you see fertilizer prices going for 2021 and 2022?
So a few things. Last fall, fertilizer usage, we had a good dry fall throughout the US and in Canada. For the most part, fall usage rates were pretty high. So inventory has been used up pretty good is my understanding. If we're going to plant, would you say, Jeff, 94 million acres of corn, we are going to use a fair amount of fertilizer, and fertilizer is certainly a supply and demand business. So I'm painting you the story that fertilizer prices will likely be up quite a little bit by the time we get to spring. It feels like it. Looking out further, that's a harder one to see. But I think we're going to be in some relatively buoyant fertilizer prices for the next little bit.
Thanks, Don. Jeff, will the funds have control over the highs and lows for future crop prices? Do they prefer corn or beans?
Well, they like them both, depending on what's going on in the marketplace, and I'm scrambling here to find something. Right now, the funds like corn so well that they're long almost 400,000 corn contracts. They're long 160,000 soybean contracts, and they are actually short 4,000 wheat contracts. So yes, the funds have a effect on the marketplace, and should they ever want to liquidate these long positions in corn and soybeans, it certainly would suck some premium right out of this market in a hurry. You know, but the takeaway on what I just told you here with the links on corn and soybeans and being, you know, basically even on wheat, what's that tell you? The funds like corn and soybeans, and they're not as excited about wheat. And I'm a more willing seller of wheat than anything, because wheat's one of those crops grown everywhere throughout the world and almost harvested about every month throughout the world.
So just in follow up to that, what news would move that, may cause them to make a dramatic liquidation of the position? Any insight on that?
Yeah, lots of things could be. We can't get COVID under control, which is going to reduce demand. U.S.-China tensions, relations deteriorate, and China stops buying U.S. goods or U.S. ag commodities again. That would send us down limit.
Okay.
So, and once the funds, and it's hard, like I said, it's hard for me to get bearish until we know the size of the 21-22 crop. But, you know, once the funds realize that we're starting to build stocks and inventories again, they'll start liquidating their long positions.
Okay. This question, and maybe you'll have to, if you've already answered it, I apologize. So will the funds have control over the highs and lows for future crop prices? Did we already say that one, Jeff? Sorry. And do they prefer corn or beans?
I think the funds in the marketplace probably give us higher highs and lower lows when they're in a big way. Yeah. Perfect.
The next question may be more of a statement. How can you be so bullish on corn, soybean, and wheat?
Because the stocks data that the USDA is showing us is that things are tight. And in soybeans, the stars are lining up that tells me we need to ration demand. And the way you do that is through price. And I have not seen any signs yet where we are rationing any soybean demand at this point in time.
Okay. Do you think interest rates will rise to help battle inflation?
At some point in time, they have to, but right now it appears to me the Feds are more concerned about deflation than they are inflation. And they have continued to make statements and comments that they're going to keep interest rates historically low levels for as long as probably is needed. But at some point in time, that all has to reverse itself.
Thanks, Jeff. Will the U.S. ag industry get more than 35% aid from Washington in 2021 and 2022?
No, I hope not. We have $5 corn and $13.50 bean futures, or $5.50 corn futures and $13.50 bean futures. They shouldn't get any. They should actually probably send some back in, but don't tell any U.S. farmer I said that.
Sounds good. We'll keep the recording in Canada here. What are land values doing in the Midwest, up or down with these crop prices?
Land values in 2020 was up 1.7% in Iowa versus 2019. I've seen some land sell this summer or this winter around central Iowa here at $12,000 an acre. Some up in northwest Iowa has gone as high as $14,000 an acre.
Okay. Thanks, Jeff.
That's good land, all tillable, highly productive land.
Okay. Next one, we have a couple more here, Jeff. Do you foresee any chance GameStop or Reddit style influence in the commodity markets?
It could happen. There are ETFs out there, and you can Google this one. One of them is simply called Corn, C-O-R-N. It trades on the exchange. It's simply an exchange traded fund that is long corn futures, and it's a way for the average guy, if he wants to be long corn futures and not open up a brokerage account, he could go buy some corn ETF, and there's one for wheat and there's one for soybeans. That would be a way for a Reddit, GameStop type situation to play out in commodity markets. And I think President Trump showed us the power of social media, but so did that whole GameStop situation. It shows you the power of social media when people unite through social media to make something happen. And it's kind of a neat thing that went on. It probably found a weak link in our system here, and it'll be interesting to see how this all eventually plays out. But it could happen.
Thanks, Jeff. With Biden's new mandates for electric vehicles and all of government fleet vehicles to start, do you see demand in ethanol industry starting a slow downward spiral and eventual death in the long term?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
And it's a slow death, but it'll be a very, very, very slow death. But yes, I think the electric vehicle market is the ultimate demise of corn ethanol. And I know that on the surface looks like a bad thing, but by the time we get to that point, and we're talking, in my opinion, that won't happen until I'm long gone. But when we get to that point, world demand for food needs and will offset that. We'll need that probably to meet the feed or the food demand and everything else.
One more here, Jeff. Estimate of 94 million acres of corn versus estimate 86 million acres harvested. Is this typical? And what typically happens with all of those unharvested acres? Also, do 94 million acres grown for silage, or those acres just corn grain acres?
That would include the silage acres, and then we always lose some acres every year, and then we cut some for higher silage and
I think that's all I have, Jeff. Thank you for everyone for sending in their questions, and thank you, Jeff, for your presentation.
No, thanks everybody.
We can do a virtual clap, show Jeff your appreciation. I'm not quite sure how you can do that, but I see a few high fives coming in. So thank you, everyone.